She was nobody's choice, a servant pushed away, rejected by Sarah, and sent into the burning desert with her little son. Thirsty, scared, and all alone, she felt invisible and forgotten by everyone. But in the silence of that hot desert, she called out to God, calling him ROI, the God who sees me. And even when no one else cared, God saw her pain and promised she was not forgotten. Stay with us to hear Hagar's powerful story of sorrow, courage, and God's amazing love. This is not just her story, it's a promise for anyone who feels lost and alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss a moment of this unforgettable story. And also share this video with someone you love and care about. Now let's dive in. The desert wind was hot and dry, blowing across the tents of Abram and Sarai. The sky was blue and wide, and the sheep bleated softly in the fields nearby. It looked peaceful. It looked perfect. But not everything was as it seemed. Inside one of those tents, there lived a woman named Hagar. She was a servant girl, quiet, careful, and always watching. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't laugh unless everyone else was laughing. And even then, her smile was small and shy. She was from Egypt, far from her homeland. She didn't belong to herself. She belonged to Sarai. Sarai was Abram's wife. She was kind, but there was always a sadness behind her eyes, like a candle that never fully lit up a room. For years, Sarai and Abram had prayed for a baby. They wanted a child so badly. But the years went by, and nothing happened. Sarai tried to be strong. She cooked. She cleaned. She smiled when visitors came. But at night, when no one was watching, her shoulders slumped, and tears rolled down her face into her pillow. Her heart was tired of waiting. And then, she made a decision. One morning, Sarai called Abram and said in a voice that trembled, "The Lord has not let me have children, so maybe you can build a family through my servant." Abram looked at her. "Through Hagar?" Sarai nodded. "Yes. Take her as your wife. Let her carry the child." Hagar was nearby when she heard it. Her heart stopped. What? She wanted to speak, to cry out, to run. But she couldn't. She was a servant. She had no choice. That night, Hagar sat alone in her corner, staring at the stars. Her hands trembled. "Why me?" she whispered into the wind. "Why must I carry this pain?" And so, Hagar became Abram's wife. She didn't love him. He didn't love her. She was just chosen to carry a child. A child that wouldn't be called hers. A child she had no say over. And then, just as Sarai had hoped, Hagar became pregnant. She felt it, the little flutter inside her belly. A tiny heartbeat. A new life growing. But instead of joy, there was something else in the tent. Jealousy. Sarai saw the way Abram brought Hagar food. The way he checked on her. The way she smiled sometimes, touching her belly. And Hagar, she began to feel proud. She had what Sarai did not. A child. It wasn't right, but it was real. And Sarai noticed. One morning, Sarai slammed a pot down harder than usual. The water inside splashed. Hagar looked up, startled. "You think you're better than me now?" Sarai snapped. Hagar's eyes widened. "No, my lady, I..." But Sarai didn't listen. "Don't lie to me. You walk around like a queen. You think you're important just because you carry his child." "I never said that." "You didn't have to." Sarai hissed. "I can see it in your eyes." The tent grew colder that day. Sarai started giving her harder work. Washing heavy blankets. Carrying water longer distances. Cleaning after everyone else had gone to bed. Sometimes she didn't even speak to Hagar. Other times, her words were sharp like thorns. Days passed. Hagar's back ached. Her hands were raw. Her heart felt heavier than the baby inside her. One evening, when the stars had just begun to shine, Hagar sat on the edge of the camp, hugging her belly. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered to the sky. "I didn't choose this." She looked around. No one cared. No one saw. So she stood. And she ran. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't pack anything. She just ran. Through the trees. Across the fields. Into the dry, silent wilderness. Her feet hurt. Her throat was dry. The sun was hot. But she kept going. Far, far away from Sarai. Far from the harsh words. Far from the pain. She was alone. Pregnant. Tired. And lost. She stumbled to a stop near a spring of water in the desert. It was the only spot with shade. She sank to the ground, leaned against a rock, and closed her eyes. "God," she whispered, "do you see me?" Silence. Nothing more. But then, something happened. A light shimmered beside her. A warm, glowing presence. She opened her eyes. Standing before her was an angel. His eyes were kind. His face was calm like the sea. "Hagar," he said gently, "servant of Sarai, where have you come from? And where are you going?" Hagar's lips trembled. "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai." The angel nodded slowly. He understood. Then he spoke something Hagar never expected. "Go back to her." "What?" she thought. "Go back." But the angel wasn't finished. "Go back to your mistress and obey her. For I will give you a promise, something great. You will have a son. Name him Ishmael, which means God hears, because the Lord has heard your cry. Your son will be strong and wild like a donkey. He will live freely, and his family will become a great nation." Hagar couldn't speak. Her heart burned in her chest. No one had ever made her a promise before. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with love, with honor, with truth. She looked up at the angel and whispered the name that would echo for generations. "You are El Roi, the God who sees me." She wept. Not because she was scared, but because for the first time in her life, she felt seen. The sun dipped lower in the sky as Hagar filled her hands with water and drank deeply from the spring. It tasted like hope. She stood, steadied herself, and turned back the way she came. Back to the tent. Back to Sarai. Back to her painful place, but not the same. Now she walked with a promise inside her. A child. A future. And the knowledge that God sees her. Even in the desert. Even in the dark. Even when no one else does. The camp was filled with celebration. People were laughing, singing, and clapping their hands. Bright fabrics waved in the breeze. Sweet smells of roasted meat and baked bread floated through the air. But because the impossible had happened. Sarai, now called Sarah, had given birth to a baby boy. Her laughter rang out across the desert. She named the child Isaac, which means laughter, because even in her old age, God had made her laugh with joy. She held her baby close, smiling wider than she ever had before. Abram, now Abraham, stood beside her, tears in his eyes. After all the years, after all the prayers, God had kept his promise. Isaac was the child of the covenant. The child God said would become a great nation. Everyone gathered to bless him and celebrate. But in the corner of the celebration stood Hagar. And beside her, holding onto her dress, was her own son, Ishmael. He was growing tall and strong, his eyes full of fire and curiosity. He laughed too, but not the same kind of laugh. Sometimes, his laugh was a little too loud, a little too wild, a little too proud. And Sarah noticed. It happened on the day of Isaac's great feast. People were gathered in a circle, watching little Isaac take his first steps. They clapped and shouted with joy. But Ishmael, now a teenager, stood nearby, watching it all. He didn't clap. Instead, he laughed in a way that made Sarah's smile fade. Not kind laughter. Not joyful laughter. But mocking laughter. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Was he making fun of her son? Was this servant's child trying to rise above the promised one? Her joy turned to anger. She walked straight to Abraham, her voice shaking. "That boy," she said sharply. "That son of Hagar, he must not stay here." Abraham frowned. "What?" "Get rid of the slave woman and her son," Sarah snapped. "That boy will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham's heart sank. Ishmael was his son too. He remembered when Hagar told him she was pregnant. He remembered the tiny baby in her arms. He had watched him grow, taught him to walk, to speak, to laugh. Now Sarah wanted them gone. Forever. That night, Abraham couldn't sleep. He walked back and forth under the stars, staring at the sky and whispering to God. And then, God answered. "Do what Sarah says," the Lord spoke gently. "For Isaac is the child through whom my promise will come. But don't worry about Ishmael. I will also make a nation from him, because he is your son." Abraham nodded slowly. His heart still ached, but he knew God had a plan. Even in this. Even in goodbye. Early the next morning, before the sun rose, Abraham filled a skin with water and packed bread into a small bag. He stepped quietly into Hagar's tent. She was sleeping with Ishmael, arms wrapped around him like a shield. "Hagar," he whispered. She opened her eyes and saw the bag in his hands. "No," she said, sitting up quickly. "Abraham, no." He looked down. His voice was heavy. "God will be with you." Tears filled her eyes as he helped her stand. She took the bread. The water. She held Ishmael's hand tightly as they stepped out into the cold morning desert. She didn't look back. Her heart was already breaking. The sun rose high in the sky. The sand burned beneath their feet. The water skin grew lighter. Ishmael was tired. Hagar was quiet. There was no one to help them. No home to return to. No tent to shade them. Just emptiness. Just heat. Just fear. They wandered through the desert of Beersheba, looking for help. There was none. The last drop of water dripped from the skin. Hagar looked down at her son. He was weak. Sweating. Coughing. Stumbling. She grabbed his hand. "Come on, Ishmael. Just a little farther." But he fell. She caught him in her arms and carried him beneath a bush. It was the only bit of shade she could find. She laid him down gently. His lips were dry. His eyes barely open. Then Hagar did something no mother ever wants to do. She walked away. Not because she didn't love him, but because she loved him too much to watch him die. She went a little distance, just far enough that she couldn't see his face, but she could still hear his voice. Then she sat down and wept. "I can't do this," she cried. "I can't watch my son die. Oh God, why did you let this happen?" The wind blew. The sun burned. But then, something happened. Heaven leaned in. And God heard. He didn't just hear Hagar's cry. He heard Ishmael's cry. The boy's voice floated up into the sky like smoke, and the Lord answered. An angel of God called from heaven. "Hagar, what's wrong?" She looked up, startled. "Do not be afraid," the voice said gently. "God has heard the boy crying where he is. Go to him. Lift him up. Take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Tears rolled down Hagar's face. Then God opened her eyes. And right there in front of her was a well of water, fresh, full of life. She ran, fell to her knees, filled the skin with water, ran back to Ishmael. She lifted his head and poured the water gently over his lips. He swallowed, slowly, then again. His eyes blinked open. He was alive. Hagar held him close, crying and laughing at the same time. God had not forgotten them. God had not abandoned them. He had seen them. He had heard them. Just like before. And from that day on, the Lord was with Ishmael. He grew strong in the wilderness. He became a skilled archer, swift and brave. He lived freely, just as the angel had said. And Hagar? She never forgot the voice in the desert. She never forgot the water that saved them. She never forgot the name she had spoken all those years ago. ROI, the God who sees me. Because even when everyone else turned their backs, even when the world said, "You're not important," even when her heart broke in the wilderness, God saw her. And that changed everything. The sun rose slowly over the wilderness. The land of Beersheba was dry and quiet, just rocks, sand, and wind. No homes, no cities, no gates or walls, just wild land stretching for miles and miles. And in the middle of it all stood a small tent. It wasn't much, just a few sticks, a blanket, and a shelter from the sun. But inside that tent were two people God had not forgotten. Hagar and her son, Ishmael, the boy who should have died in the desert, the boy who cried out, and God heard him, the boy whom God had promised would become a great nation. Time passed. Seasons changed. Ishmael grew. His arms became strong. His eyes became sharp. His feet ran fast across the sand. He was no longer a baby in the bush. He was a wild boy now. A desert child. He could shoot arrows and track animals. He could climb rocks, find water, and hear danger before it came. But most of all, Ishmael could feel the wilderness inside him. Free, fierce, fearless. He didn't have fine clothes. He didn't ride horses with soldiers. He didn't sit at a table like Isaac or live in a rich tent like Abraham. But he had something else. He had his mother. And he had the God who saw him. Hagar watched her son each morning as he trained. She remembered carrying him in her womb. She remembered running from Sarah's tent. She remembered the tears and the angel. She remembered the bush, the cry, the voice from heaven, the water in the well. All of it. She never forgot. Because every day with her son was a miracle. And every day in the wilderness was a lesson in trust. She had no husband to help her. No servants to wait on her. No armies to protect her. Just two hands, one heart, and one God who never left her side. Sometimes, Ishmael asked hard questions. "Mother, why did Sarah hate us?" Hagar would sigh. Because she was afraid. Of what? Of losing her place. Of losing love. Of losing what was promised. "Did Father love me?" Ishmael asked once. Hagar looked away. She didn't know what to say. So she told him the truth. He cared for you, but he had to choose. And he obeyed God. Ishmael nodded slowly. "Did God choose me too?" She smiled. "Oh yes, my son. He chose you even before you were born. He heard your cry when no one else did. He gave me a promise about you. And God never breaks his promises." As the years passed, Ishmael's heart became stronger than his muscles. He was learning to forgive, to wait, to hope, even when things were hard, even when other travelers looked down on him because he wasn't from Isaac's line, even when he felt like an outsider. He knew something they didn't. He had met the God who hears, the God who sees, ***. And so, he kept walking in the wilderness, trusting, believing, becoming the man he was born to be. One day, Ishmael stood on a high hill, wind blowing through his hair. He saw a caravan in the distance, camels moving slowly across the sand. "Mother," he called. Hagar stepped out of the tent, her hair wrapped in cloth to shield from the sun. "What is it?" "People. They're coming." They both watched as the group came closer, traders from Egypt, just like the land Hagar had come from. She felt a deep ache in her heart. It had been so long since she'd seen her homeland. The traders stopped and greeted them with kindness. They gave news from faraway cities and told stories of kings and battles. One of them, an older woman, smiled at Hagar and said, "You've raised a fine son. He is strong and noble." Hagar nodded proudly. "Have you found a wife for him yet?" Hagar's smile faded. "No, not yet." "Well," the woman said kindly, "I know of a girl. She is pure-hearted and kind. From Egypt. She would be a strong partner for a desert man." Hagar's heart stirred. Egypt. Her home. Maybe, just maybe, this was part of God's plan too. Not long after, Hagar arranged for Ishmael to be married. The young woman was kind and gentle, with eyes like the Nile, deep and full of life. She respected Ishmael's wild heart and honored his mother. And together, they began their own tent. Their own story. Their own chapter. Hagar sat outside her tent that night, staring at the stars. She thought about all she had lived through. All the pain. All the tears. All the running. All the moments she thought she would die. And yet here she was. Still standing. Still smiling. Still held by the God who never let go. Ishmael came and sat beside her, leaning against her shoulder. "Do you still talk to ROI?" he asked softly. She smiled. "Every day." "What do you say?" "I thank him for every sunrise. Every drop of water. Every breath. And I remind him of his promise." "What promise?" Ishmael asked, though he already knew. "That your children will become a great nation. That your name will not be forgotten. That you were not a mistake, Ishmael. You were chosen." The wind whispered through the sand. The stars shimmered above. Ishmael closed his eyes. And in that moment he felt it again. That deep, unshakable truth. God sees me. Even here. Even now. Even in the wilderness. And so the years rolled on. Ishmael became the father of 12 sons, just like God had said. Each one strong. Each one a leader of a tribe. They filled the land with their families, their songs, and their stories. A nation rose up in the wilderness. Not in palaces. Not in wealth. But in strength. In freedom. In faith. And it all began with one mother, one cry, one God who saw. Hagar's story was not forgotten. Her name was remembered through the ages. She was the only woman in the Bible to name God directly. ROI. The God who sees me, asterisk asterisk. She was a servant girl the world didn't value. A mother thrown away. A woman crushed by sorrow. But heaven heard her. And heaven remembered her. And heaven answered her. Because the God of Abraham and Isaac was also the God of Hagar and Ishmael. And he always will be. If you've ever felt unseen, forgotten, or pushed aside, remember Hagar. Because even in the middle of a dry, lonely desert, God saw her. And he sees you too. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because more life-changing Bible stories are on the way, and you won't want to miss what God has to say next.